Hello everyone, I am Sidhant and I study in Akshara Public School. Today, we'll be analyzing the lesson, The Thief's Story. So the characters in the story are Anil and Hari Singh. The story is set in Anil's home. How does the story start? The story starts with the introduction of Hari, who meets Anil during a wrestling match. Hari was a 15-year-old boy and had a fair, successful experience in robbery. And Anil was a tall, lean fellow who was kind and simple living person. Hari speaks with Anil with some flattery and tries to approach him as friend.
You look a bit of wrestler yourself. So you do.
Then Hari asks to Anil whether he can work for him.
I want to work for you, but I can't pay you. Can you feed me? Can you cook? Yes, I can cook. If you can cook, then maybe I can feed you.
What happens next? Anil accepts him and takes Hari to his home. That night, Hari cooks food for Anil, but it was given to stray dog by Anil because it was cooked terribly bad. Thereafter, he taught Hari to cook food and to read and write. Every morning, Hari made tea for Anil and spent his day going to market to buy supplies. He somehow managed to steal a rupee every day while shopping. Though Anil knew it, he never cared about the fact. Hari says that Anil earned money at irregular intervals and earned through writing in some magazines. One day, Hari saw Anil coming home with a bundle of notes. Hari's eyes got reddened. He worked for Anil for a month and Anil trusted him so intensely that he gave Hari a key to door. But Hari hadn't done any of his job of robbing, so he thought of robbing Anil. He saw Anil tucking the notes under the mattress. As soon as Anil slept, Hari made a plan to rob the money and catch the 10:30 Lucknow train. Climax. Hari's hand slipped under the mattress. He grabbed the money, put it in his waist, and started running towards the station. He noticed that there were 600 rupees in 50s. But as and when he reached the station, he saw the train left the platform. Although Hari could get onto train, he didn't, for the reasons best known to him. He was all alone in the platform. He decided to go back, but the only person he knew in the city was Anil. He didn't have any friends. He felt that friends were root for troubles. He left from railway station and ran towards Maidan. As he reached there, the drops of diesel hit him hard. But later, it started raining heavily. He realized that the notes turned damp. He also realizes that he earned money but lost the trust and life with Anil. He could no more read and write. He says from his experience that if angry men were robbed, they showed some anger. And if poor men were robbed, they accepted that they were robbed or were even unaware about it. So, he says that Anil would be sad, not because of losing money, but trust. What happens in the end? Hari goes back to Anil's home, keeps his money back very carefully. He explains that returning money was more harder than stealing. And then, the very next morning, Anil calls Hari Singh and gives him some money.
I made some money yesterday. Now you will be paid regularly.
Then he realizes that notes were still damp.
Today we will start writing sentences.
Although Anil knew that Hari had attempted to steal the money, he didn't mention about it. From then on, Anil and Hari Singh lived their life peacefully. So this is all about the chapter, The Thief's Story. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Zunaira from 10th Standard, here to say a story from our English supplementary reader, which is A Triumph of Surgery. So let's know what is a triumph of surgery and why is this the title of our story. So triumph is the victory or achievement, and surgery is a treatment of injuries or disorder of the body by incision or manipulation, especially with the instruments. So, simple meaning of triumph of surgery is the victory in a surgery or victory from a surgery. So the characters involved in this story are Mr. Harriot, the narrator, who is kind, a successful veterinary doctor, a sensible and tactful person, understanding and a fun-loving individual. Mistress Humphrey, a rich mistress, was rich, foolishly indulgent, ignorant, anxious, silly, tender-hearted, simple, and a grateful lady, and a dog named Tricky, and at last Hodkin, a gardener. The sites where the story had taken place are Mistress Humphrey's house, street, and at the surgery. So, how does the story start? Mistress Humphrey, a rich mistress, took her dog for a walk outside. A nearby veterinary doctor observed the dog and gets shocked as the dog looked like a bloated sausage. He advised her to stop giving him extras and sweets. But she couldn't refuse as the dog seemed to be weak. Unfortunately, Tricky fell ill. Build up. What happens next? When the When the doctor saw Tricky, he gets worried and asks Mistress Pumphrey about his diet and exercises. She replied, he loved eating cream cakes, chocolates, and he has his little walks with me, and couldn't have ring throwing as the gardener Hawking is facing lumbago. Mistress Pumphrey couldn't relent him for having more food, which made him unwell. The veterinarian advised her to hospitalize Tricky. At the surgery for a few days, he looked dull and laid motionless on the carpet. For next 2 days, he was under observation and started showing some interest by the end of second day. The surgeon provided him with plenty of water and nothing else. Tricky began trotting with other dogs on the street. From then on, his progress was rapid. Mr. Swamfrey called the surgeon a dozen times to know the condition of Tricky's health. From his rapid cure, she started sending 2 dozen of eggs, bottles of wine, and brandy, which were consumed by the surgeon and his friends instead of Tricky. So, the problem and climax in the story. The first problem was Tricky loved eating sweets like cream cakes, chocolates which were given to him in abundance. He looked like a bloated sausage, his eyes bloodshot and hummy, and his tongue lolled from his jaws. The second problem was Mistress Pumphrey showed a lot of love and care towards Tricky and couldn't relent herself to stop giving him extras and sweets. The climax in the story was the things like dozen of eggs, bottles of wine, and brandy which were sent to Tricky became a ceremonial occasion for the surgeon and his friends. For the surgeon, it was temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest, but he knew that Mistress Humphrey was suffering, So he called her to say that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. That's the most sad and important part of the story. The blind love and affection of Mr. Swamfrey towards Tricky. His rapid progress in just few days. Conclusion or resolution of the story. When Tricky was at the surgery, he recovered earlier and started showing some interest in his surroundings. He became more healthier and pretty than before. He would play and run with other dogs, which was new for him. What happens in the end? Mr. Swamfrey was so happy after seeing Tricky. He was brought out in the garden by the surgeon, and later she defended herself from his lick and bark. All his stuffs were brought back, none of which were used. She cried and thanked Mr. Harriot, the surgeon, and considered it as a triumph of surgery. Thank you, everyone.